Even if your company does casual Fridays, you still want to look more presentable and more professional than everyone else.
The first known use of the term professionalism was in the year 1856.
Do you want to get ahead? Then guess what? Being professional is the key.
Burton J. Bledstein, or Bledstein, I don't really know how to say it, writes in his book, The Culture of Professionalism, the Middle Class, and the Development of Higher Education in America. By and large, the American university came into existence to serve and promote professional authority in society. More than in any other Western country in the last century, the development of higher education in America made it possible a social faith in merit, competence, discipline, and control that were basic to accepted conceptions of achievement and success. Regard for professional expertise compelled people to believe the voices of authority unquestioningly, thereby undermining self-confidence and discouraging independent evaluation. Bledstein, a cultural historian, covers the transition in culture and economy toward the normalization of professional culture from the early 1800s to the present day. The period in which professional culture was developed, according to Bledstein, was during the mid-Victorian era. This was a Eurocentric cultural period in which women were expected to cover up their bodies, people of so-called class were to sit upright at the table, no elbows at the table, cut and chop your food properly.
So when you're at the office, be extremely professional.
Use this spoon for soup and that spoon for stirring. Men hold a watch and a handkerchief in their breast pocket. You get the idea. This dude, a mid-Victorian professional, could own 500 slaves. He could be a banker, he could be a doctor, but he certainly wasn't a farmer, a carpenter, or a factory worker. If he drank alcohol, it was probably a fine bourbon from a fancy chalice, not a stale mead from a dirty mug.
Even the bag that you bring your lunch or your laptop to work in says a lot about you. Now imagine a well-dressed guy who brings a nice leather attaché to work every day. Now imagine that same guy using a leftover trash bag or grocery bag to bring his stuff in. Big difference.
While professionalism can sometimes be associated with positive characterological traits such as reliability, promptness, respect, being organized, being a good communicator, being cool-tempered and reasonable, and so on, it really has to do with appearance more than anything else.
One of the surefire ways to be professional at work is to impress your boss.
Nudity is unprofessional. Nipples are unprofessional. Cross-dressing is unprofessional. Being barefoot is unprofessional. Burping and farting are unprofessional. Afros and dreadlocks are unprofessional. Ebonics are unprofessional. Sombreros are unprofessional. Body odor is unprofessional. Having your ass crack out while fixing a clogged faucet is unprofessional. Bledstein describes a variety of very specific ways that a particular sector of American society came to embody what we now call professionalism. These elements of culture include purposeful use of complicated and inaccessible language, demonstrating what appears to be, but may not be, superior knowledge, more high society tastes in food, alcohol, architectural styles, social groups, etc., ownership of certain kinds of pets and not other kinds of pets, proper use of grammar and dialect, i.e., don't talk black or like a hick, perfectionism, appearing to never make mistakes, politeness, keeping up the appearance of always being nice and agreeable, competitiveness, demonstrating all of the above in service of outcompeting others for economic mobility and reinforcing middle to upper class positionality.
Like the adage goes, don't dress for the job you have, dress for the job you want.
Professionalism is ultimately a class-based form of code switching because while everybody farts, shits, burps, uses some kind of slang, makes thousands of mistakes every day, and is ultimately a broken, decaying slab of flesh whose eyes will eventually be eaten by maggots like every other arrangement of organic matter on planet Earth, the only way to maintain a professional appearance is to lie. But what's the purpose of the lie? To seem like you're not poor, and that you're better than people who are poor. On some level, my entire video, A History of Nonprofit Corporatization, was also sort of about how nonprofits became professionalized, but I used the term corporatized instead. The arguments in favor of professionalization of the sector were basically as follows. Professionalism comes along with it, more reliability, people being on time, people conducting themselves ethically, people take professionals more seriously, and so service and advocacy-based nonprofits may be able to advance missions better if the sector is to professionalize. But as with most decisions in a capitalist society, the decision to professionalize didn't come from nonprofit workers and volunteers, nor from the communities that nonprofits exist to serve. The decision came from
the capitalists.
The professionalization of the sector had a lot of terrible side effects, but I'll just point out 3. 1. Depoliticization. I hope I said that right. The culture of professionalism requires for us to be polite, agreeable, to appear upbeat and unemotional, to not complain too much, and to be team players, but not like in the union sense. Groups that are overly political in an anti-capitalist and revolutionary way simply can't be polite and agreeable all the time because they're explicitly fighting the very economic system that controls our lives. As I pointed out in part 6, certain political stances will make your nonprofit actually lose funding and therefore jobs. And so the professionalist takeover of the sector brought with it a generally apolitical orientation towards social change, because a political perspective will say that a disempowered group needs to gain power and learn to fight within the arena of politics through elections, judicial system reforms, labor organizing, and building mass movements, and maybe some kind of commie vanguard party or whatever. A less confrontational and more professional kind of view is simply that if you get more evidence-based and high-quality services to said disempowered groups through recruitment of those with advanced forms of education, licenses, and certificates, those with less power will just sort of feel better, and maybe that's all that social change really is. Over time, it became accepted that nonprofit workers, who came to believe that working within nonprofits, simply don't have to be political. You just have to be professional. 2. Cost. Becoming a professional is expensive. You only become a professional if you get an advanced degree and usually numerous certifications and licenses to practice some sort of helping-centered trade. This might be a degree in psychology or counseling, social work, law, or medicine. So professionalization created an accessibility problem. You either had to be born into the kind of wealth that could get you an advanced degree, or you'd have to go into a lot of debt to get such a degree, which meant that you couldn't rock the boat for the next several decades while you chased professional jobs in order to repay that debt. But another problem, once you get beyond accessibility, is that once you have an advanced degree and licensed to do whatever super helpful thing is that you do, you have to constantly pay for new trainings and recertifications, attend seminars and conventions, to market yourself, and to enter into a whole other kind of industrial complex that maintains the fake idea that what you do for a living is more important than people that do things like scrub toilets or fix faucets or build chairs or whatever. As a result, you expect higher than average wages, not necessarily because you're greedy or you're a snooty anti-lower class piece of shit or something, but because you literally can't maintain your position of professionalism without actually making more money than ordinary people. So nonprofits that used to run on a shoestring would now either have to raise way more money to pay people competitive salaries, or they'd have to close their doors and give up on trying to help people altogether. This new issue of high salary demands created a new conversation in the nonprofit sector over the years, which was that it's offensive to assume nonprofit workers deserve poverty wages, which then justified nonprofits coming to look exactly the same as private businesses. Nonprofit wages now had to compete with the private sector's wages. Some have argued in recent years that we should give up on the term nonprofit sector and call it the social sector. The reason is that this nonprofit sector and the for-profit sector have blurred together to the point that the term and concept of a quote-unquote nonprofit is actually meaningless. Most people at this point just assume that the way you help people is you join a business, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit. You get a bunch of extremely educated professionals. They use their extremely sophisticated knowledge about how to help people. You pay them a fuck ton of money to help them do that. In this way, the professionalization of the sector has, in roughly 40 years, normalized the very idea that the only people in society who are capable of helping others are those who have tons of education about how to do so, get paid tons of money to do so, and will refuse to do so if their professional degrees and high salaries aren't recognized by the larger society as proof that they are, indeed, extremely helpful individuals. Number 3, psychology. The largest damage I think professionalization of the sector did was it transformed ordinary people's psychology to where they came to think of themselves as essentially helpless, and that professional helpers within places called nonprofits, which do good, are helpful. This is a massively disempowering way for non-professionals to think of themselves. And while you can't really blame the nonprofit world as if it did this to people in and of itself, I mean, neoliberalism is really what did it. Every nonprofit executive director, manager, board member, salaried worker, and volunteer played along with this mass delusion that you never have to think about how to build power amongst the disempowered. You just join a 501c3, secure some funding somehow, and that's how you change the world. The other form of psychological damage that I think was done is that over time, society internalized the psychology of nonprofit marketing and advertising. So while Coca-Cola might run an ad campaign that deludes people into thinking that Coca-Cola is associated with joy, togetherness, family, health, fun, feeling sexy, and other such deliberate lies, the nonprofit sector's marketing and advertisement currency became its constant churning out of success stories, making it look like there were only successes coming out of the sector's interventions into society, while society all the while has been completely falling apart. Join us next time for Part 8, Success Stories. Sam, Carly Berman, Zach, Isabel Abdullali, Kelgar Trout, Nicholas Mastello, Katie Drax, Davey MK, Diane Prado, Lauren, Garbage Opossum, Space Commune, Ashley Altman, Pablo Ruiz, Ulrich Volker Anderson, Jamie Smith, Dylan Yee, Labor Kyle, Fiona, Chaotic Capybara, The Appalachian Left, Dirt Knight, L, Halim Al-Ra, Wes, Leo Samalati, Bryden Beck, Laura Dale, Noah, Esmel Fade, Ace Super Arjuna Butt, Sebastian Nitu, Waltzing Kia. Fairy tone. Meow, 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 meow. Unprofessional. Our swagger. While he's programming, he lets out a fart. Writing codes, switching codes in his abode. On the road, his stomach explodes. His stomach explodes.